Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Funny how management doesn't solve problems until the problems become their problems. Our first story described this situation in great detail. So before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Refuse to help? Let's play a little game. Back around 1987, I was a courier on the afternoon shift, 11:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. Dispatch cut off the calls at 6 p.m., and after a 5-minute grace period, you could clear and go home at 6:05 p.m. and get paid to 8:30 p.m. My route had a highway down the middle, and the roads I covered on both sides had a lot of businesses. Those roads were busy with a 40 km/h, 25 mph speed limit and lots of lights. My route got very busy, and I would often be at one end of the area and get calls at the last minute for the opposite end. The only way to make it work was to use the highway often and speed. Next to my area was another courier we'll call Richard. Richard would finish early and wait on the on-ramp of the highway at 5:50 p.m. daily, waiting to clear and go home. As I got too busy, I got in the radio and asked Richard to help with 2 to 4 calls. And guess what? He refused. I went to my manager requesting they help with my workload. Management informed me there was no one that could help and I had to suck it up. When I informed him that Richard was right there and had quite a bit of free time, he still said it was my route and my problem. I'm pissed at this point and figure, screw it, I'll definitely figure it out. One of the key items at work was that the nightly line haul truck must leave on time at 8:30 p.m. sharp or management hears from head office. The very next day I start my route, and I do not use the highway and stick to the speed limit religiously. I roll in the first day at 9 p.m. on overtime, with the managers calling me every 5 minutes for an ETA. I have 3 managers waiting for me to explain and simply told them it was busy and went home. Next day, same results. So I keep this up for a week. After a full week of my tardiness, management is under pressure and they come to me to do better. I point out that there is a speed limit and maybe Richard could help. They tell me I should pick up the pace, speed, and at that point I said, no problem. Put that in writing. They walked away deflated, hoping I would be back earlier. Nope. I did this another week, much to the utter dismay of the managers. At the end of the second week, the managers meet me again at the dock with a noticeable smugness about them. They then inform me that as a group, they have come up with a solution. I listened as they explained how they did a route analysis and have determined that Richard should get about 25% of my area to help out. The beauty was that I retained the best area and Richard got all the crappy calls. Monday rolls around and they informed Richard of his new route, and he's pissed and vocal about it. The line haul truck on time the rest of the week, and Richard worked till 8:30 nightly. The new route was great and enjoyed to reduce stress. Richard lasted about another 2 months and then quit. Lesson is, don't be a jerk. Speeding should never be an option, except for emergency service vehicles responding to an emergency, of course. Also, why would someone and/or a company be willing to risk hundreds in fines and loss of license to then not be able to work? I'm glad you didn't maliciously comply to their order of speeding by getting yourself in an accident or losing your license. That would have showed them, though. And our second story. Woman confuses me for employee. So last night, I'm finishing up my shift as an EMT, and it's been a long and tiring one. The calls weren't bad, but there were a lot of them, and we were all over the damn country. Shift is over, I change back into my comfy clothes, sweats, t-shirt, hoodie, and I head to the store to get something for dinner. I get there just in time since they're closing in 10 minutes. I assure the cashier that I was just grabbing something quick, and I go and pick up a lasagna from the frozen section. I grab them and turn to head to the checkout when I hear, ahem. Not a throat-clearing sound, but someone saying it like they were reading it out loud. Turn and look to see a woman, and she snaps off a, I need you to go in the back and get me a pack of frozen pretzels. I say that I don't work here and point out where an employee just went behind an end cap. Woman snaps, you do work here, and you need to stop being lazy and get me my pretzels. I again say, I don't work here, and turn to walk to the self-check. She flips her crap and storms off, muttering about lazy employees and managers. I finish checking out and I'm grabbing my stuff and leaving when I see her again with her card and a manager, and she yells, "There she is! That's the lazy bee!" and starts towards me. I'm not even going to engage, so I hold up my receipt and my one item to the self-check girl and walk out. I hear the manager raising his voice and saying, "Ma'am, ma'am, ma'am." Turns out she left her cart behind and stormed out of the store to confront me. I get in my car to drive off, but she's standing in front of it so I can't go anywhere. She's also giving me a tongue lashing that I'm too checked out to really pay attention to. Great. I'm already on my last nerve and this woman is hate-effing it. Manager sticks his head out the door and hollers, "Ma'am." She turns and makes a hushing motion towards him. He hollers, "Ma'am," one more time, and she hollers back saying, "I'm dealing with your employee since you're too much of a little bee to do it yourself." He bristles and says, "Madam." She cuts him off with, "Shut the F up," screeched at the top of her lungs. He shrugs, and I watch him go back inside, fiddle with the locks, flip the sign to closed, and pull down the shades. As I'm watching this, she gets annoyed that I'm not paying her my full attention, and she yells, "What the hell are you looking at that's so damned important to ignore me?" I just pointed at the shop and say they just closed and locked the doors. I'm not sure what she screamed since it was pretty incoherent, but she did run towards the door. Seeing my chance, I drove off, leaving her pounding on the door and cursing. So question, do employees who are on the clock really make a regular habit of pretending to not work somewhere while also conveniently being out of uniform? To the point, assuming someone is lying is valid? And our last story. I got fired, but also my revenge. A couple years ago, I had a crappy job in IT. I was supposed to be outsourced as some sort of customer support coordinator, but the guy I was outsourced to actually wanted me to work as tech support. I didn't mind, but figured it was a yellow flag, so I called my company's HR and said it was okay. My company was very small and new, and the owner/CEO usually dealt with HR stuff, even though he was clearly unexperienced. Couple months went by, and I noticed I was the one working the most, by far, while the on-site boss and my other colleagues just stayed in the office and watched girls on Instagram. Since I'm a woman, I felt like it was a boys' club, but stayed on the job because I liked working with users, so I shrugged it off. One of the long-run tasks I was assigned to was collecting OS licensing and specs from every computer in the 3 different company buildings, a task that demanded most of my time and lasted for a couple months. I filled an individual form with the data from each computer and had it signed by its user, so I carried a big butt binder with every single form everywhere I went. I was told to preferably keep that binder with me and take it home after I was done for the day so it wouldn't get lost or manipulated, and so I did. As time went by, I started feeling more alienated by my team, and my boss demands became increasingly out of place, up to fixing a security camera. I went from my previous, "perhaps I shouldn't be doing that," to a straight-up no. From then on, they all started practically ignoring me, which I reported to my company to no avail. I was already past the probation period, so they would have to compensate me if they fired me. I figured they'd send me to some other company or whatever, but that didn't happen. The last day I worked there, the boss was on the same building I was collecting data. It was the smallest building, so I'd finished that day, which I couldn't because the boss decided to make me tag each computer's wires in a certain way. I was done with half the computers, and he then tells me it's been done wrong, showed me a different way of doing it, and told me to start again. I told him I wouldn't finish everything in time, so he suggested I skip lunch, which of course I did not. So I came back from lunch, started over with the labeling at a slow pace, and obviously didn't finish the job in a day. Boss suggested I stayed, unpaid, overtime, politely refused by claiming I had an appointment, and went home. Next day, I was heading to this building, and my company calls me to say I'm fired. I wasn't surprised at all, but I was still very angry, sad, and with feelings of rejection, so I started crying, went into a shop to buy a sandwich and a Coke, and that sweet elderly couple offered me help and consolation, but I told them I'd be fine, and they helped me a lot by giving me the sandwich for free. I thanked them and went to a nearby park to eat my sandwich while still crying, until I realized something and my tears almost stopped mid-cheek. I had the binder with me. That binder had hundreds of hours of work that hadn't been backed up or digitalized in any way, every form individually signed, and all those were for an incoming external audit. So I finished my sandwich and my Coke, got up and went to a nearby garbage container, dumped the binder, and went home almost laughing. Got home and called my company to reconfirm where I'd go and collect my final paycheck, while reminding them I've reported my situation several times and received no response, which could represent some legal inquiries, at least in my country. When the day came, they received me with caution and a very juicy paycheck. I tried to play it cool, calling it acceptable, got TFO as soon as I could, and went back home almost skipping. And a week later, idiot ex-boss calls me, sounding desperate, asking me for the binder. Where could it be, he asked me. Oh, I'm pretty sure it's in X building where I last worked. Are you absolutely sure it's not in the office? Well, call X. Maybe it's there. Hope you find it. I was dying to tell them that it's probably turned into mush or dust, but I didn't in case they were recording the call, most likely. Later that day, an ex-teammate called me and asked again and gave him the same answer while trying not to sound like a grinning villain. All that work I did, and there wasn't even in vain. Got several contact references, a couple of side hustles to make it through unemployment, and even a scholarship for the career I'm doing now. And some people that kept in touch with me asked me, WTF happened since I wasn't around anymore and my boss and teammates were all over the place frantically doing my task again. Didn't tell the full story, but implied that my work was mismanaged. Don't know exactly how the audit resulted, but I know for a fact it was an absolute crapstorm, and I'm sorry I missed it. As for them, the company that hired me doesn't exist anymore. They were not evil, but thoroughly incompetent. The a-hole boss? Fired shortly afterwards, started his own project, but didn't work, so he's a supervisor somewhere else. I hope you enjoyed the read, and I hope this gives you some hint of hope in these times of inhumane work ethic and capitalist despair. Your former boss is a jerk of the highest order. Never sack the people who can torpedo your entire company is the teachable moment here. You did the right thing disposing of the binder. They want it. They should have asked for it before firing. That's on them. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.